Okay, so Singapore just had its general election, May 3rd, 2025. And the big story, unsurprisingly perhaps, is the PAP, the People's Action Party, securing a massive 87% of the seats in parliament.
87%. Yeah, it's a commanding figure. It really cements their position once again.
It almost feels like part of the landscape, you know?
Yeah.
Like the humidity or seeing Marina Bay Sands. It's just there. And this was Lawrence Wong's first election as PM, right?
Yeah,
Since taking
thanks.
over last year.
Exactly. So this was his chance to get that full mandate directly from the people.
Uh-huh.
But the big question, I suppose, is why such a big win? Is it purely an endorsement?
Or does it tell us more about, well, the difficulties the opposition faces? That's really what we want to dig into today, isn't it?
Absolutely. Because, 6 decades in power, that's not just a long time. It fundamentally shapes everything, the politics, people's expectations.
Yeah.
So yeah, the result seems clear, but the reasons were worth exploring.
Right. So we'll look at why the PP keeps winning, what challenges the opposition bumps up against.
Mhm. And the key issues that seem to sway voters this time, things like housing, which is always huge, but also newer concerns like AI and jobs, and maybe touch on how the rest of the world reacted.
Sounds good. We'll try and keep it lively, too. Politics can get a bit dry otherwise.
Always helps. So yeah, settle in. Let's unpack Singapore's political scene.
Okay, let's start with the core question then. Why is the PAP so dominant? It can't just be chance, surely. There's a system, a history there. And Lee Kuan Yew, the founding PM, seems central to that story.
Oh, absolutely central. You can't understand modern Singapore, politically or economically, without looking at Lee Kuan Yew. He didn't just lead the country. He deliberately engineered its structure.
Engineered. How so?
Well, his philosophy was often described as a sort of guided democracy, or maybe democracy with training wheels. The priority, first and foremost, was stability and economic growth.
Ah, the famous quote, something like, free speech is great, but let's make sure you can afford lunch first.
Pretty much, yeah. That captures the essence.
Yeah.
And you have to admit, the results were dramatic. Singapore went from, a relatively underdeveloped island,
A swampy backwater, as some described it.
right, to a first world economy in, 30 years? That transformation creates a very powerful legacy and a lot of goodwill.
It definitely builds trust, that link between strong government and tangible benefits, good jobs, rising incomes, security. But there was a trade-off, wasn't there? A more paternalistic style, strict social controls.
Definitely. It was a top-down approach.
Yeah.
The famous chewing gum ban is like the classic small example, but it reflects a broader willingness to regulate social behavior for perceived order.
And that core formula, economic stability, meritocracy,
Right.
though people debate how meritocratic it really is now.
True. There are questions about social mobility.
And social control through things like public housing, HDB, and the CPF savings scheme, that still seems to be the bedrock of their appeal today.
It absolutely is. That foundation is still very powerful. And then you add the structural elements of the political system itself, like the group representation constituencies, the GRCs.
Right, the GRCs, introduced in '88, I think, where parties run teams of candidates, not just individuals.
Yes, teams of 4 or 5. The stated goal was ensuring minority race representation in parliament, which is, a valid concern in a multiracial society.
A laudable goal, yeah. But the criticism has always been that it also protects weaker PAP candidates, right? You bundle them with a popular minister, and the whole team gets swept in.
That's the flip side. It makes it significantly harder for opposition parties to contest effectively. They need to find not just one strong candidate, but a whole team, often to go up against established PAPI heavyweights.
It definitely raises the bar for entry. And you see the impact in the results, 83 out of 93 seats for the PIP this time. Even close fights like the PSP and West Coast GRC didn't quite get them over the line. PM Wong's own GRC, Ang Mo Kio, was a solid win for them.
It shows the system working as, perhaps, intended by the PAP, consolidating their power. Which brings us back to Lawrence Wong.
Yeah, the new PM, he definitely presents a different image compared to, say, Lee Hsien Loong or certainly Lee Kuan Yew. More approachable.
Seems to be the aim. We saw him playing guitar, being very visible during the COVID response. Someone called him a friendly neighborhood bank manager, which kind of captures that vibe.
Laughs slightly.
Yeah.
I can see that. Pragmatic, steady, good communicator, those seem to be his perceived strengths.
For sure. But the flip side is maybe some see him as a bit too cautious, lacking that sort of iron fist aura that LKY had, for better or worse.
So the big challenge for him now, having won this mandate, is to really define his era of leadership, right? Not just be the successor, but show his own vision.
Precisely. He needs to step out of the shadow, so to speak, and articulate what his Singapore looks like. Now let's flip the coin. What about the opposition? Why do they find it so consistently tough?
Well, the Workers' Party, the WP, they're usually seen as the main opposition force. They have actual seats in parliament, which is significant in itself.
10 seats out of 93 this time.
Yeah.
They held on to their traditional strongholds,
Mm-hmm.
Hugang SMC and Aljani GRC.
But still, 10 seats. It's
Yeah.
like being, I don't know, the tallest building in Tuas. You stand out locally, but the skyline is dominated elsewhere, and their overall vote share dipped slightly this time, didn't it?
It did, yeah.
Yeah.
Just a little bit. And you wonder why. Is it maybe a lack of the kind of star power they had with figures like Lothia Kang or Chen Shou Mao in the past?
Could be. Those were very recognizable figures. And you can't discount the PAPs campaigning either. They're very effective at controlling the narrative, sometimes with quite pointed attacks. Remember the East Coast plan stuff?
Oh, yeah, that became a whole meme. And maybe there's just that voter pragmatism we talked about, better the devil you know, especially if the economy feels okay.
Stick with what works, or seems to work. Then you have the Progress Singapore Party, the PSP, led by Dr. Tan Cheng Bok.
A veteran figure, definitely. Former PIP man himself, still going strong at 85, which is remarkable.
It really is. But despite his personal standing, the PSP didn't make major inroads. That narrow loss in West Coast GRC again, even with him contesting there, must have been disappointing for them.
It highlights the challenge. Even a respected figure with deep roots struggles to break that PA hold. And what's the PSP offering that's truly different?
That seems to be the question, often perceived as maybe PAP-lite, but more critical, without fundamentally different policy ideas.
Perhaps. And there's this succession question there, too, isn't there? So much seems built around Dr. Tan. What happens to the PSP after him?
That's a huge question mark for their future, yeah. You can't build a party long-term on just one person, however respected. They need broader leadership, a clearer platform beyond criticism.
Definitely. And then you've got the smaller parties, the SDP, the Reform Party.
Their impact felt minimal this election, really. It was almost like,
Yeah.
like they were there, they ran, but didn't capture much attention.
Someone described it like a school project presented after the deadline. A bit harsh, maybe, but it captures that sense of lacking real impact.
And the lesson for all the opposition seems clear. You need more than just saying KP is bad. You need concrete, appealing alternatives. You need to give people something positive to vote for.
Exactly. You have to offer a credible vision. Okay, let's shift gears to the specific issues that were really debated during the campaign. Housing has to be top of the list.
Oh, always. HDB flats, BTO waiting times. It's practically a national obsession, isn't it? Like that joke, the only thing Singaporeans complain about more than the weather is BTO queues.
Sounds about right. Everyone's affected somehow. So what were the main pitches on housing?
The PAP basically promised more flats faster, tackling those wait times head on, which is a smart move politically.
Addressing a key pain point. And the opposition.
Generally, it was variations on we can do it better, but often without the detailed blueprints of how. Less specifics on how they'd speed things up or make it cheaper beyond just criticizing the PP's approach.
Right. And so when people vote, maybe they think, well, the PAP built most of these flats in the first place.
So maybe we should stick with the contractor who knows the building kind of logic. Trust the incumbent on something so fundamental.
It makes sense. Then there's immigration. Always a tricky one.
Yeah.
The third rail of Singapore politics, they sometimes call it.
Yeah, it's super sensitive. You've got the economic need for foreign talent, especially with an aging population and low birth rate.
A demographic reality they can't ignore.
But then you have the local concerns, jobs, competition, cost of living, social integration. It's a real balancing act.
And the PP's position tends to be pragmatic, right?
Yeah.
Acknowledge the need, but tweak the rules, manage the flow, try to address the anxieties.
While the opposition often takes a more populist line, calling for tighter restrictions, fewer foreigners.
Often, yes.
Mm-hmm.
But again, sometimes without a clear alternative plan for how the economy would function without that foreign workforce component.
So it seems like pragmatism won out over populism on that front again. Voters maybe recognize the complexity.
It seems likely. And the third big issue area, AI and the future of jobs. This feels newer, but definitely growing in importance.
For sure. People see the headlines about automation, robots, AI changing industries, and they worry about their jobs, their kids' jobs. They want reassurance.
And the PAP has been quite proactive here, haven't they? With initiatives like Skills Future, constantly talking about retraining, upskilling, preparing the workforce.
They definitely have a narrative and existing programs they can point to. What about the opposition on AI and jobs?
Well, Based on the coverage,
Mm.
it seems like there wasn't much said. Almost. Slight pause crickets.
Really? That seems like a missed opportunity given how big this issue is becoming.
It does. So by default, almost, the PIP won on that front because they were the ones actively talking about it and framing solutions, even if people debate the effectiveness of those solutions.
Interesting. Okay, let's zoom out. How did the rest of the world see this election? Any notable reactions?
Yeah, a few different angles. China's state media, for instance, tended to emphasize the stability aspect. Singapore as a predictable, stable place, which implicitly contrasts with, say, Hong Kong or Taiwan.
Right, playing into that narrative.
Mhm.
What about Western media? BBC, CNN, the usual suspects.
More focus on the one-party dominance angle, as you'd expect. Concerns about lack of political competition framed through a Western democratic lens.
But maybe missing the point that for many Singaporeans, things like good 5G coverage or efficient public transport might actually rank higher than multi-party democracy.
That's often the disconnect, yeah. Priorities can differ. And then you look closer to home, ASEAN neighbors like Malaysia or Indonesia.
What's the view from there?
Often it seems like a bit of admiration, maybe even envy, particularly regarding the low levels of corruption in Singapore.
Ah, the clean governance aspect.
Exactly. There's that slightly cynical joke that maybe paying ministers those huge salaries, like $2 million a year, is actually cost-effective because it prevents grand corruption that could cost the economy far more.
Rocks. An expensive insurance policy, perhaps. Okay, so looking ahead then. What does this election tell us about Singapore's future path? PPP is strong, but are there clouds on the horizon?
Well, one clear area of uncertainty is succession planning beyond Lawrence Wong. He's cemented his place now, but who's next? The 4G leaders, the fourth generation, haven't produced an obvious heir apparent yet.
Names like Chan Chun Sing or Ong Ye Kung get mentioned, but it's not like there's a designated successor waiting in the wings.
Not clearly, no. Someone joked maybe they'd need a hologram of Lee Kuan Yew eventually, just to underline how unclear the next step is.
That would be something. And for the opposition, any chance of them actually winning power anytime soon?
Realistically, it seems unlikely in the near term. It would probably take a major implosion within the PAP or a massive shift in what voters prioritize, like actively wanting more political turbulence. Neither seems imminent.
So that basic deal, the social contract, prosperity, and stability in exchange for political control, that still holds.
It seems to, yes. That core bargain remains potent. But, and this is important, the ground is shifting slowly.
How so?
Younger Singaporeans, raised in a much more connected world, they have different expectations. More demands for openness, for participation. The PIP needs to adapt to that.
Or risk becoming seen as, what, a relic, out of touch in the smart nation they're trying to build.
Exactly. They can't just rely on the old formula forever. They need to evolve with the society they govern.
So wrapping up then, the 2025 election basically confirmed the PAP's continued strength, built on its history and effective strategies.
And it also highlighted the opposition's ongoing struggle to offer a compelling alternative that really breaks through.
Singaporeans still trust the PAP, it seems, but maybe not completely blindly. The core political script feels familiar.
For now, yes. But the interesting question is, as Singapore faces all these future challenges, technology, geopolitics, social change, will that script start to change? Are subtle shifts happening under the surface that we're not fully seeing yet?
That's the big question to keep watching, I suppose. Something to chew on. Now, if you'll excuse us, that BTOQ is probably calling.
Probably best to get in line.